evening, my dear one. I'm Tara, and I welcome you gently to this night of stillness. Wherever you are, a quiet room, a distant city, or a soft countryside wrapped in silence, this moment belongs entirely to you. It is a space between thoughts, a breath between days, where ancient wisdom meets the calm rhythm of the heart. Take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, let the weight of your day soften into the mattress beneath you. Feel the gentle pull of gravity, the way the earth holds you without asking for anything in return. You are safe now. You are home within yourself. Tonight, we'll journey through old stories whispered by monks, travelers, and seekers who wandered the path of awakening. Each tale has drifted across centuries, through the stillness of temples and the hush of moonlit mountains. They speak not of gods or rituals, but of the quiet truths we all share, the nature of peace, the acceptance of change, the tenderness of impermanence. When I was first drawn to the teachings of the Buddha, I imagined wisdom as something distant, something one must climb mountains to find. But over time, I discovered that wisdom often sits quietly at the edge of our daily lives, waiting for us to slow down enough to notice. It appears in the breath between two thoughts, in the silence between two heartbeats, in the moment you decide not to rush. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." And that is what we will do tonight. We will turn inward softly, gently, not as scholars or devotees, but as wanderers seeking the warmth of understanding. As you listen, I invite you to let go of the need to remember or analyze. These stories are not lessons to memorize. They are fragrances meant to be inhaled. Each one carries a different note, some of humility, some of surrender, some of boundless compassion. Yet, all return to the same still heart of truth. Perhaps you can hear the quiet around you now, the low hum of the night, the subtle rhythm of your own breathing, the faint murmur of life continuing in its timeless flow. Imagine these stories as ripples moving across a tranquil lake. With each ripple, your thoughts will soften, your body will loosen, and your heart will open a little wider to the mystery that holds us all. As the night deepens, let yourself drift between the words. If your mind wanders, it's all right. Even the clouds drift before finding the moon. Allow the rhythm of each phrase to guide you deeper into calm. The wisdom of Zen does not command, it invites. It does not promise escape from the world, but the understanding of how to rest peacefully within it. Wherever you are listening from across the seas, under a familiar sky, or in a corner of quiet solitude, know that this moment connects us. Leave me a whisper in the comments. Tell me where this story found you tonight. We are each tiny flames in the vastness of being, yet together we form a single, luminous stillness. Now take another breath, slow, full, and patient. With each inhale, imagine drawing in centuries of calm. With each exhale, let go of the noise, the expectations, the little self that tries to control what cannot be controlled. In this stillness, may you remember that peace is not something to achieve. It is something you already are. And now, our journey begins in a humble valley, where a simple man and his horse meet the turns of fortune with calm eyes and patient heart. The first story of the farmer and his horse will show us how life flows beyond our judgments of good and bad, teaching the gentle art of acceptance and quiet wisdom. Take another slow breath. Let the valley unfold before you, and together, let us step softly into the story of the farmer and the horse. In a quiet valley cradled between green hills, there lived a humble farmer. His days began before the sun, when the mist still lay like a blanket across the fields. The world was soft then, the air cool, the sky pale, the earth waiting to wake. The farmer's hands were rough with years of labor, yet his heart remained calm. He owned little more than the small patch of land he tilled, and one strong horse that helped him plow the soil. To him, each morning was its own kind of blessing. He never hurried the seasons. He sowed when it was time to sow, harvested when it was time to reap, and rested when it was time to rest. But one dawn, as he stepped into the yard, he found the stable door open and the horse gone. Hoofprints led toward the distant hills, fading into fog. The farmer stood in silence for a long moment. When the neighbors heard, they hurried over. "Oh, what terrible luck," they cried. "Your horse has run away. How will you plow your fields? This is a misfortune." The farmer looked at the empty stable, then at the valley beyond, and replied simply, "Maybe." The neighbors exchanged puzzled glances. They thought he was too calm, perhaps too foolish to understand the seriousness of his loss. But the farmer's eyes carried a softness, as if he was watching something far beyond the reach of the present moment. He returned to his field and continued his work by hand, slow but steady, breathing with the rhythm of the earth. Days passed. Then one afternoon, the quiet valley filled with the sound of hooves. The farmer looked up and saw his horse returning, but it was not alone. Behind it ran a group of wild horses, swift and powerful, following it home. The neighbors gathered again, their faces shining with delight. "What wonderful fortune," they exclaimed. "Now you are rich with horses. How blessed you are." The farmer smiled faintly, stroking the mane of his old companion. "Maybe," he said once more. That night, the stars shimmered like grains of sand spilled across the heavens. The farmer's son, young and eager, decided to tame one of the wild horses. But the horse was fierce and untamed. As the boy mounted, it reared and threw him hard to the ground. His leg broke badly. Pain echoed through the house. The neighbors came again, shaking their heads. "Oh, what bad luck," they said. "Your poor son. Now he cannot help you with your work." The farmer sat by his son's bed, holding his hand. The oil lamp flickered against the clay walls, casting long, soft shadows. He listened to the boy's shallow breaths and said gently, "Maybe." The villagers left, whispering that grief had numbed his mind. But the farmer did not feel numb. He felt the turning of something larger, something beyond his control, something vast and unknowable. Weeks later, the valley thundered with news. The kingdom had gone to war. Soldiers came through the village, taking every able young man to fight. The mothers wept, the fathers bowed their heads. But when they reached the farmer's house, they saw the boy's bandaged leg and passed him by. When the neighbors returned, their eyes were wet with both sorrow and envy. "How fortunate you are," they said. "Your son has been spared." The farmer looked out over the valley, where dawn was spilling gold across the fields. "Maybe," he said softly, and returned to his work. The Buddha once said, "Nothing is permanent. Everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming." The farmer understood this not as a lesson, but as a way of living. To him, each moment was both seed and fruit, not good, not bad, simply unfolding. As night deepens and you breathe quietly in the dark, think of this man in his valley, watching life move like clouds drifting across an endless sky. Sometimes the clouds bring rain, sometimes sunlight, but the sky remains untouched. Beneath all fortune and misfortune lies that same sky within you, calm, vast, unchanging. And when you whisper, "Maybe," the clouds pass without taking your peace. The story of the farmer lingers like the scent of rain after a storm, gentle, earthy, and clean. His single word, "maybe," carries a wisdom deeper than reason, a quiet understanding that life refuses to be divided into simple halves of good or bad. The neighbors were not cruel people. They were simply caught in the rhythm of reaction. They met each change with joy or despair, like reeds bending to every gust of wind. Yet the farmer remained steady. His heart had learned the art of stillness, the kind that listens before judging, breathes before speaking, and waits before deciding what a moment means. In Zen teaching, this stillness is called apeksha, equanimity, a mind that stays balanced amid the waves of life. It is not cold or indifferent. It is tender in its acceptance. The farmer loved his son, his horse, his land. He felt joy, he felt sorrow, but he did not cling to either. Like a tree rooted deeply in the soil, he swayed with the winds but never broke. How often in our own lives do we rush to declare something as fortunate or disastrous? A closed door feels like failure until another opens. A painful ending feels like loss until it makes space for renewal. The mind loves conclusions, but life does not work that way. It unfolds in spirals, not straight lines. When the farmer said maybe, he was not uncertain. He was awake. He understood that judgment closes the heart, while wonder keeps it open. His maybe was not hesitation, it was reverence. Reverence for the great weaving of causes and conditions that shape each moment. Reverence for the mystery that no one can see in full. The Buddha taught, with our thoughts, we make the world. When the mind names a thing as good, we grasp it and suffer when it fades. When the mind names it bad, we resist it and suffer just the same. The farmer's way was neither grasping nor resisting, it was resting. Resting in the quiet knowing that life, like water, cannot be held too tightly. Sometimes, peace is not found in answers, but in openness. When we stop asking, "Why me?" and begin whispering, "Maybe this too has meaning," something within us softens. The edges of fear blur. The heart finds room for both light and shadow. So tonight, as you lie beneath the weight of your own stories, the gains, the losses, the hopes that turned another way, breathe a quiet maybe. You do not need to understand it all. You do not need to name what has come or gone. Just trust that beneath every turning of fortune, there is a deeper harmony at work. The valley is never still, yet it is always whole. Seasons rise and fade, yet the mountain endures. So it is with you. Within your stillness lives the same timeless peace that filled the farmer's heart, patient, unshaken, eternal. And when you wake tomorrow, remember, whatever comes to meet you, simply smile, breathe, and say, maybe. Far beyond the noise of the cities, hidden in the folds of a quiet mountain forest, stood a small monastery. Each morning, the air shimmered with incense smoke curling toward the rafters, and the sound of temple bells rolled gently through the mist. Among the monks who lived there was one elder, known not for his knowledge or sermons, but for his unshakable serenity. He moved slowly, spoke softly, and smiled as though he carried the entire world with effortless grace. One day, during afternoon tea, a young novice approached him. The boy had just begun his monastic life and was still full of eagerness, his questions, his dreams, his uncertainties pouring out like rushing water. He bowed and said, "Master, how can you be so peaceful? You seem untouched by loss, untouched by worry. What is your secret?" The old monk lifted a small clay teacup from the table. It was plain and slightly cracked, its rim uneven from years of use. Turning it gently in his hands, he said, "Do you see this cup?" The boy nodded. "To me," said the monk, "this cup is already broken." The boy's eyes widened in surprise. "Already broken," he repeated. "But master, the cup is whole. You drink from it every day." The monk smiled. "Yes, it holds my tea now. It brings me comfort, warmth, and quiet. But I know that someday, perhaps by carelessness or accident, it will fall and shatter. When that happens, I will not grieve, because in my mind, it has already happened. Knowing this, I cherish it even more while it is here." The young monk sat silently. The words settled in him like falling leaves, soft but heavy with meaning. The old monk poured tea into the boy's cup. The scent of roasted leaves rose with the steam. "Everything you see, everything you love," he continued, "is like this cup, fragile, temporary, always in the process of change. To cling to what cannot stay is to invite sorrow. But when you see that all things are already broken, already changing, you begin to love them completely. Not because they will last forever, but because they will not." Outside, the wind stirred the bamboo grove. The boy listened to the gentle tapping of stalks against each other, a rhythm as ancient as the earth. He felt something shift in his chest, a small loosening, a tender acceptance. The master took a slow sip of tea. "The world," he said, "is not here to be possessed. It is here to be experienced. When you hold something, a cup, a person, a moment, hold it lightly, as though it were made of morning mist. Let it pass through your hands without regret. That is peace." The boy bowed deeply. He didn't yet understand everything, but he felt the beauty of it. As he rose, the master smiled again and added, "This tea tastes sweeter because it will end." That evening, as the sun dissolved into the horizon, the young monk sat alone outside the hall. He held his cup close and watched the last rays of light tremble across its surface. In that fragile reflection, he saw not just the cup, but himself, temporary, delicate, yet shining with the light of the moment. The Buddha said, "All conditioned things are impermanent." When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. The young monk did not yet know how deeply true those words were, but he had begun to see that impermanence was not the enemy of love. It was its reason. The next morning, the young monk awoke before dawn. The air was cool and thin, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. As he walked toward the meditation hall, he noticed drops of dew glistening on the leaves, perfect, trembling, and momentary. He watched them shimmer in the dim light, then vanish as the sun rose. Something within him stirred, the same quiet understanding that had touched him the day before. He went to the old monk who was sweeping the courtyard and said softly, "Master, when I look at the dew, I see the same truth as your cup. It shines for a moment, and then it's gone." The master nodded. "Yes," he said, "the dew, the cup, the breath, the life, all the same. The beauty of each lies not in how long it stays, but in how deeply we see it while it's here." The boy asked, "But if everything must pass, why love it all?" The old monk leaned on his broom and smiled, his eyes calm as still water. "Because that is what makes love sacred," he said. "When you know something will end, you hold it with greater tenderness. You stop demanding it to be eternal, and instead, you let it be enough. The cherry blossom is beautiful because it falls. The sunset moves us because it fades. When we cling to permanence, we miss the miracle of the moment." They stood together in silence, listening to the wind. The sound of the bamboo, the rustle of robes, the faint heartbeat of the world. The master spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "When the heart learns to bow before impermanence, it becomes vast. In that vastness, there is peace. The loss of the cup is no tragedy, for in every ending, something else begins, a space, a lesson, a deeper stillness." That day, the young monk practiced sweeping the courtyard slowly, as though each stroke of the broom were a prayer. When a gust of wind knocked over a pot, shattering it on the stones, he startled for a moment. Then he smiled gently, remembering. The cup was already broken. That evening, the master watched him from afar and saw the change. The way the boy's movements had softened, the way his gaze lingered on each passing thing as if to say thank you. The master thought, "This is the beginning of wisdom, to love and let go at the same time." As the moon rose above the mountain, the boy returned to his quarters. He placed his teacup by the window, letting the pale light fill it. He whispered to himself, already broken, already whole. And as he drifted into sleep, the world outside continued its gentle dance of change. The clouds moving, the river flowing, the leaves falling and returning. The boy's heart, no longer afraid of endings, rested in the quiet truth that everything that begins will end, and everything that ends will begin again. To see impermanence clearly is to awaken. To cherish it is to be free. And somewhere in the silence of the night, the old monk poured himself another cup of tea, smiling, perhaps, because he knew it too would soon be gone. Long ago, two monks set out on a journey through the mountains. One was old, his robes worn thin by years of travel and meditation. The other was young, newly ordained, filled with questions and ideals about purity and the strictness of their vows. They walked side by side in silence, the sound of their sandals mingling with the rhythm of the wind moving through the pines. By midday, clouds gathered, and rain began to fall, first gently, then in heavy sheets that turned the path into a stream of mud. The monks continued walking until they reached a river swollen with rainwater, rushing fast and fierce. On the riverbank stood a woman, dressed in fine clothes now drenched and clinging to her. She looked helplessly at the torrent before her. "Please," she cried, "can one of you help me cross?" The younger monk froze. Their order's vows forbade them from touching women, even in kindness. He turned to his elder companion, expecting him to refuse. But the older monk, without a word, lifted the woman onto his back. He waded through the water with calm strength, the river pushing hard against his legs. When they reached the other side, he gently set her down. She bowed deeply in gratitude, her eyes filled with relief, and went on her way down the road. The younger monk followed in silence, but his heart churned with conflict. The rain stopped, the sky cleared, yet the storm within him only grew stronger. They walked for hours, through forests and fields, until at last they reached the gates of their monastery. Only then did the younger monk speak, his voice tight with restrained indignation. "Master," he said, "we have taken vows to avoid contact with women. How could you carry her like that? It goes against everything we have been taught." The elder monk stopped, turned, and looked gently into the younger man's eyes. "Brother," he said softly, "I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The younger monk stood still, his mouth half open, his anger dissolving into confusion. He realized at that moment that while the elder monk's body had carried the woman across the river, his own mind had carried her the entire journey. The old monk smiled, then continued walking toward the monastery, his robes whispering against the earth. The young monk followed behind, his thoughts unfolding like petals, opening in slow dawn light. He began to see how heavy his own attachments were to rules, to appearances, to the need to be right. The the river was not only made of water, it was the river of life itself, constant, unpredictable, and filled with crossings that required compassion more than doctrine. The Buddha once said, "Attachment to views is the greatest bondage." And so, the elder monk was free not because he ignored his vows, but because he lived their spirit rather than their letter. Compassion, after all, is the deepest form of purity. As the young monk lay awake that night, he understood that he had been carrying many things across unseen rivers: grudges, judgments, memories of small wrongs, each weighing upon his heart. He breathed deeply, and for the first time felt them begin to lift. And somewhere in the quiet dark, he whispered to himself, "I will learn to set them down." The morning after the river crossing was bright and still. Sunlight poured through the pines, and the sound of birds echoed through the valley. The younger monk rose early, his robe still damp from the previous day's rain. He stepped outside the hall and saw the elder monk sitting beneath a tree, eyes half closed, a faint smile resting on his lips. For a long moment, the younger monk simply watched. The master sat as if he were made of the same stillness as the earth itself, unmoving, yet alive in every breath. Finally, the young monk bowed deeply and said, "Master, yesterday, when you said you set her down long ago, I think I am beginning to understand. But how does one truly let go? The mind clings before I even realize it has." The elder monk opened his eyes and looked toward the rising sun. "Letting go," he said, "is not something the mind does once. It is something the heart practices in every moment. We hold on to thoughts, to memories, to small insults, to old fears. We polish them like stones in our pocket, and they weigh us down. Letting go is not forgetting. It is releasing the need to carry what no longer serves us." He picked up a leaf and held it in his palm. "When this leaf falls from the tree," he said, "it does not resist the wind. It does not ask why. It simply drifts where it must. That is its freedom." The younger monk listened, his chest softening with understanding. "But what if the mind picks it up again?" he asked quietly. The elder smiled. "Then you notice it, and you set it down again, and again, and again, until one day you realize that even the act of setting down has become effortless." They sat together in silence as the world woke around them, the light growing warmer, the birds more insistent, the day unfolding without haste. The younger monk thought of the river, how it had flowed fiercely one day, and now ran clear and calm. He realized that his own thoughts were like that river, turbulent when resisted, peaceful when allowed to flow. The elder monk finally said, "When you carried that woman in your mind, it was not she who burdened you. It was your attachment to the idea of being pure. When the mind clings to what is right or wrong, it builds walls around compassion. But when it lets go, love flows freely, like water finding its way through stone." The young monk felt tears in his eyes, though he could not say if they came from sorrow or relief. He bowed again, And as he did, he felt something fall away, a small pride, a small certainty, a small self. That night, as he lay in his simple bed, he thought again of the elder monk's words. "I set her down hours ago." He repeated them silently, letting them echo in the quiet room. With each repetition, another burden lifted, small, invisible things that had followed him for years. And as sleep drifted over him, he dreamed of the river, wide, shimmering, infinite. He walked into it, feeling the current wash against his skin. It was not cold, not frightening. It was alive, flowing, endless. He let the water carry him, and for the first time, he did not fight. The Buddha once said, "Drop by drop, the water pot is filled." Likewise, the wise man, gathering little by little, fills himself with good. Letting go is like that one drop at a time, one release at a time. Until one day, you realize that the burden is gone, and what remains is only the lightness of being. So as you rest tonight, breathe softly, and let the river of your own thoughts flow where it will. If you find yourself holding on, smile gently and set it down again and again. Each release is a return to peace. And when the dawn comes, may you wake as the young monk did, lighter, clearer, and closer to the calm of the river within. There once was a man who loved to row his small boat along the river that curved gently through the valley. Every evening, as the sun touched the mountains with soft gold, he would push the oars through the quiet water and let his mind drift like the current. The river carried him, and he carried his thoughts, sometimes heavy with worry, sometimes light with wonder. He had learned, over many seasons, to follow the river without hurry, to meet its moods without resistance. One evening, as mist rolled off the water, he noticed another boat approaching fast, cutting through the calm. His heart leapt with irritation. "Move aside," he shouted, his voice cracking with tension. But the other boat did not change course. They collided, and the man's boat rocked violently. He nearly lost his balance, and the water splashed into his lap. His hands tightened on the oars, his chest burned with anger. He was ready to shout, to demand an explanation, to place blame. He imagined a careless sailor, perhaps drunk or foolish, steering straight into him. His mind churned, weaving stories of offense and injustice. The river seemed suddenly unfair, the sky too gray, the world too cruel. His pulse raced, his breath came shallow and fast. But then he looked again. There was no one in the boat. It was empty. Not a sailor, not a figure, not even a shadow of intent. Only the boat, drifting as it always had, guided by the wind and current. In that moment, the man's anger began to dissolve. There was no one to punish, no one to blame. The circumstances had not changed. The collision was still there, the wetness of the water still on his legs. Yet something had shifted in him. The imagined injustice evaporated, leaving only the calm recognition of what had actually occurred. The Buddha taught that suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the mind's response to them. Pain may be unavoidable, a bump, a loss, a disappointment, But anger, resentment, and blame are second arrows we shoot ourselves. The first arrow pierces, the second prolongs. And often, the second arrow is entirely unnecessary. As the man sat in his boat, letting the river rock him gently, he realized that his own mind had carried the weight of imagined wrongs. The empty boat was not an insult. It was a mirror of his own clinging, his own projections, his own unquiet heart. From that day, he did not curse the river, nor the currents, nor the drifting boats. He learned to row with attention and care, yes, but without the burden of unnecessary anger. Each ripple, each bend, each collision became an opportunity to notice his own mind, to practice patience, and to find stillness even when the river pressed against him. The water carried secrets older than any man, quiet lessons hidden in the sway of the oars, the motion of the current, the soft echo of wind across the surface. And the man, now calmer, learned to listen, not only to the river, but to himself. In the days that followed, the man often returned to the river. Each time, he carried no expectation, no desire for control. Sometimes other boats drifted toward him. Sometimes the water remained empty and still. He observed with curiosity, watching how his own mind shaped the world he experienced. When he met obstacles, he met them with calm. When the river flowed gently, he flowed with it. He began to see more than the river itself. He saw the pattern of his own thoughts, how quickly the mind labeled events as good or bad, fair or unfair. He noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders when the current was swift, the release when it slowed. He recognized that the real turbulence was often inside him, not outside. The empty boat became a symbol, a quiet teacher. Life, he realized, is full of such empty boats, situations that trigger anger, resentment, or fear, often without intention or malice from any other being. And just as with the boat, peace comes not from controlling them, but from seeing clearly, seeing that the mind can let go, can soften, can float without grasping. The river of life is unpredictable. Storms arise, collisions happen, but within each moment lies a choice to cling and suffer, or to release and remain calm. Anger, like the waves, can toss us about, but it can also dissolve if we do not feed it with stories of wrong and blame. One evening, as the sun lowered in the west, the man let the oars rest in the water. He closed his eyes and listened to the gentle lapping of waves, the whisper of wind, the quiet flow beneath the surface. In that stillness, he understood. Peace was not something to be found in smooth waters, nor in avoiding collisions, but in the heart that moves without resistance. The Buddha said, "Holding onto anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." The man on the river knew this now. The empty boat had shown him that the world is rarely against us. Often, the turbulence we feel is the turbulence we create. As night descended, the river shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting silver and shadow in equal measure. The man floated silently, aware of the vastness around him and the quiet within. The empty boat had taught him that freedom is always present, waiting to be recognized. It is found not in controlling events, but in seeing clearly, in letting go, and in allowing the mind to rest in its natural calm. And as he drifted along the current, he whispered to himself softly, like a prayer, "No one to blame, nothing to hold, only this moment." And in that surrender, the river carried him not only across its waters, but into a stillness that had always been waiting, infinite, gentle, and whole. And now, dear one, as the night stretches its quiet across your room, let us rest for a moment in the stillness we have gathered together. The stories we have traveled through, the patient farmer, the fragile teacup, the flowing river, the empty boat, are not simply tales of old. They are mirrors, reflecting the rhythms of our own hearts and the gentle truths that move quietly beneath the surface of life. Breathe slowly in and out. Feel the rise and fall of your chest, the rhythm of your own being. Everything we have heard tonight is alive in the spaces between thoughts, in the soft pauses of breath, in the awareness that holds us even when the world seems turbulent. Perhaps you notice how the farmer taught us patience, not by fortune or misfortune, but by the calm acceptance of the unfolding of life. Perhaps you feel the teacup's quiet wisdom, reminding us to cherish what is fleeting, to hold lightly what is beautiful, and to welcome impermanence with open arms. Perhaps you hear the river and the two monks, teaching that the burdens we carry are often heavier than reality, and that letting go is a practice of love, not loss. And perhaps, somewhere in the empty boat drifting on still waters, you recognize that anger and fear are often only shadows of the mind, illusions that vanish when met with clear sight and gentle awareness. These are not lessons to memorize. They are whispers meant to touch the heart, to soften it, to remind it of its natural calm. Like moonlight reflecting on quiet waters, they illuminate without pressing, guide without demanding. They show us that peace is not found by changing the world, but by resting in the truth of this moment, by releasing what cannot be held, and by opening fully to what is here now. The Buddha said, "Let go of your attachment to things that are impermanent. Suffering arises from clinging, and freedom arises from release." Tonight, in the hush of your room, let this teaching settle gently within you. Imagine letting go of every small worry, every lingering judgment, every unnecessary burden. Let it drift away as naturally as leaves on a stream. And in that letting go, notice the space that remains quiet, luminous, infinite. You may feel the pull of thought, the small insistence of tomorrow, the subtle weight of yesterday. Breathe and let it pass. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to change it. Simply let it move, as all things move, and return again to the calm within yourself. Tonight, the stories end, but their echoes remain. Let them ripple softly in your heart, guiding you into sleep, into dreams, into the gentle recognition that life flows as it must, and peace is always present when the mind rests. Wherever you are listening from, know that you are part of this quiet unfolding. You are not alone. You are a living reflection of the stillness that has always existed, waiting to be recognized in your own being. So close your eyes, breathe deeply, and surrender. Let the world drift by as you rest. Allow the night to enfold you, and know that tomorrow, with all its moments and mysteries, will arrive, as it always does, gentle, fleeting, and filled with the same quiet wisdom that lives in every story we have shared tonight. Good night, dear one. May your heart be calm. May your mind be clear. And may you awaken softly, carrying with you the peace that has always been here, waiting for you all along.